everybody. How you doing? Good to see you. My name's Ethan, if you haven't met me yet. I'm the middle school director here. You'll have to excuse me, I'm a little sick today, so I need to sit down. But everything's going great, but if you see me fall on the floor, now you know why. And then you could send someone up to help. I'm kidding, that won't happen. At least I don't think it would happen. I wanted to talk to you guys today about a really important topic. It's the topic of truth. And to help us understand what truth is, have you guys ever heard of cryptozoology? Anybody heard of that? Could you tell me what it is, Garrett? Study of mythical animals. That's true. Has anybody ever seen this TV show called Finding Bigfoot? Anybody seen that? You seen that? Is it good? Would you rate it? I haven't seen it. Best show ever? Wow. Why would you say it's the best show ever? That's crazy. Is it good because they found Bigfoot? Yeah. Well, I'll spoil it for you guys. The answer is they did not find Bigfoot, but there's a bunch of cryptozoologists who put their life's work into studying Bigfoot and trying to find him. This show aired in 2011. It ran for 9 whole seasons, and they found Bigfoot 0 times. Kind of crazy, right? And I guess it's not that surprising because I guess a lot of us wouldn't say that Bigfoot is real. But if you wanted more information on Bigfoot, I was told that there's a really good resource if you want to learn more. It's called it's an email that you can send messages to. It's called akwame@cbcbellevue.com. And if you want to find out more about Bigfoot, I heard that's a great resource. He seems pretty passionate about it. So, of course, Bigfoot's not real. It's more of an entertainment thing, right? And we can do lots of things with our lives, but if anybody suggested to you, oh, you should be a cryptozoologist, I don't know if that's a really good career path for you. And it's mainly because cryptozoology isn't like a study that is based on things that are real. It's based on things that I would call unreal. If I told you that I have a pet unicorn, or that 1 + 1 = 11, or that triangles have 2 sides, you guys wouldn't believe me because none of those things are true, right? Now, truth, sometimes when we talk about cryptozoology and silly things like that, it can be easy to spot, but I want to play a game with you, and then you're going to help me find truth in the statements following, okay? Sound good? So you're going to see a sentence like this, and then you're going to fill in the blank. So the best way to dry your phone after it gets wet is to put it in a bag of rice. Yeah, actually, that's wrong. You should not do that. There's a bunch of studies that were done, and rice is not only slower than air drying your phone, but the minerals in rice can corrode the electronic things in the phone and make it lose its lifespan faster. So you might have thought that was true. It's not. And maybe don't put your phone in rice. Okay, there you go. That one was tricky, but let's do another one. This one should be pretty easy. The highest point on Earth is Mount Everest. Wrong again. You guys think I'm crazy? I'm not. Here's a graph to prove it. So Mount Everest is really tall, but if you take into account the fact that the Earth is not a perfect sphere, it's a, what do you call that? An ellipse. It's an ellipse. And there's this other mountain called Mount Chimborazo. And Mount Chimborazo in Ecuador is actually the tallest place. It's the closest that you can get to the moon from planet Earth. It's the furthest point away from the center of the Earth. And that's the highest point on Earth. And you might say, oh, but what about measuring from the base to the summit or the peak? Well, you would be wrong again because Mauna Kea in Hawaii, I was just there over Christmas break. And that is the largest mountain. It's actually almost a whole mile larger than Mount Everest, which is crazy. But it's because Mount Everest is only the largest if you measure it from sea level. Okay. So you guys had some opportunities to find truth, and it wasn't that easy. And of course, like we said, it's a silly anecdote to talk about truth if we are discussing things like cryptozoology. But truth is really important, and especially when we come to talking about things like religion. Last week, if you came to youth group, you would have heard Austin talk about the reason why God is real, why a God has to exist. And we landed on this thing called theism. And theism is the belief in a God. I believe that the God of the Bible exists, and he's real, and he's true. But I would ask you, do you know that your religion is true? Do you know that it's based on truth? Or have you just been told that, just like you've been told that you can dry your phone quicker in a bag of rice or that Mount Everest was the highest point on planet Earth? How do you know that your religion is true? Well, I want to dive into that today, but what I want to tell you is this. I think that you should follow truth wherever it leads you. No matter what, I think you should follow the truth wherever it leads you. No matter what. And I mean anywhere. Look, I'm Christian. I hope that's obvious. But if Christianity were not true, I think you should not be a Christian. It would be a complete waste of your time to be a Christian if Christianity was false. It makes your life harder sometimes. You have to give things up. You have to, do certain things, and it's difficult. If the Muslim faith is true, you should be Islamic. And because honestly, maybe like you guys heard from Rain Ministries, it's sometimes dangerous to not be Islamic if that is true. So what I want you to know is that no matter where the truth leads you, you should follow the truth wherever it does. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, I want to examine different world religions, and there is quite a lot of them. Does anybody want to guess how many religions there are accounted for on Earth? Yeah, in the back. Over 100 is correct, but even more. 170 is, think bigger, Isaac. It is over 3,000. Keep going. Not 20 million, smaller than that. Yes. Okay, I'll give you guys the answer. It's a hard one. Scholars, okay, Ethan, last one. Yeah, actually. So 10,000 is on the high end. That was a good guess, man. 10,000 is on the high end of what scholars believe the amount of religions are. A conservative estimate is around 4,000. But there is a lot of religions to choose from. Obviously, I cannot get into all of them. Otherwise, we would be here way too long, and I want to go to bed tonight. So I'm going to talk about just a couple of them, but I want to lay some ground rules with you in our conversation about different religions, as well as maybe conversations that you might have with other people who have different faith backgrounds than you. Number one, the first ground rule that I want to lay down with you is empathy. You heard a story tonight about a person who was Muslim, and they became Christian, and that put them in danger. I read a book recently. It's a really, really good one that I would recommend. It's called Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus by Nabil Qureshi. And it's a really good apologetic book, but one of the things I took away from that was how much you have to give up if you are going to convert your life away from one faith into another faith. Very often, if you speak out about certain faiths or you leave a faith, you will either get threatened to be killed, you will be excommunicated from your community, or you will die. So it is not a light just topic to say, oh, let's talk about religion. I would say go into it with a lot of empathy, and that's what we're going to try to do today. But the other one is to not have conversations with a pile driver mentality of, I'm just going to convert you to Christianity because that's what I think is true. I do think that it is noble to tell people about your faith, but what I don't think is noble is treating people like jerks and pretending that they are idiots just because they believe something different than you. There are a lot of incredibly smart people in the world that have different faith backgrounds than us who believe what Crossroads believes. And honestly, if we are Christians, we have a first and foremost call to love our neighbors and to pray for those who persecute us. So if somebody with a different faith background is giving you a super hard time, you have to be the face of Jesus to them. So that's what I seek to do whenever I have faith conversations with people from different religions. And that's what in your small groups and what I will go commission you to do later today is I would say empathy and listening are absolutely key before we move into things. But as we continue to move into things, I want to ask the question, which religion do I choose? And last week, if you're following along, we came to a conclusion. Austin laid out some really good arguments for theism, or the belief that there is a God. But what I want to explore today is which God should you worship? And I was thinking a lot about it, and again, there are like thousands and thousands of religions. It was hard for me to wrap my head around, so I had to make a little flow chart to understand all of them, and this is that flowchart. This is what we're going to walk through today, and it helped me understand where religions sit, but I promise if it looks overwhelming, it is a little bit, but we're going to have a fun time going through it, okay? So here we go. Last week, we determined that theism is true, the belief that there is no God, if we look at the first question, is there a God? This is the answer, no. So if the answer to is there a God is no, you would be an atheist or a naturalist. That's like the category that we would fit it in, okay? Now, you might be surprised to see Buddhism on this list. You might think Buddhism is a religion, so they must believe that there's a God. Actually, Buddhists' belief is that there is no God. You might have heard of a guy named the Buddha. This is a real person in history, but he did not claim to be God, and he told people that there is no God. Buddhism is an Eastern religion that primarily focuses on emptying your mind to avoid persecution and to avoid suffering. So that's what their primary motive is. It's to avoid suffering by just emptying your mind, by becoming one with the world around you and trying to rid all of the negativity by just meditating and emptying yourself. You can eventually get to this place called nirvana. And that is what Buddhism is all about. You could also get into something called nihilism, which is the belief that nothing can be known. And that's a whole nother rabbit hole that we can go down. Other philosophical movements will say that there's no God, but there's a best way to live life anyways. Maybe it's because just through natural selection or survival of the fittest, we have gotten to this point in history because of a certain reason, and that's why we should live a certain way. But what all of these things fail to mention is the belief in a God. I can spend a whole, sermon series on its own talking about all of the atheist beliefs that you could have, all of the different lifestyles that you could go into. But I'm going to skip over this a little bit. And that's because last week we talked a long time about why God does exist. So I want to give the theistic examples kind of the light of day. And if you guys have questions about atheism, I will be here afterwards and you could ask questions about maybe why you think God does not exist. I invite questions about it, or where I think God does exist. However, we're going to move on, and I'm going to talk about another category of the question that we're trying to answer of, is there a God? And if you answer, I don't know, you would be agnostic. Now, this is connected with a dotted line because I don't really think that this is a good place to sit in. I don't know is not a kind of intellectually honest and motivated way of answering this dilemma of whether or not you fall into a certain worldview. I would encourage you, if this is you today, and you're like, I don't know, whatever, I'm just agnostic, I'm just, sitting on the fence. If God shows himself to me, whatever. I would really encourage you to lean in and seek truth hard, because there are claims that would change your life either for the better or for the extreme worse if you do not answer this soon. So I would really encourage you, don't sit in the agnostic circle for long. Don't be an I don't know. Go find out and go know the truth, okay? So the other answer that you might not have expected is kinda. Maybe there's kind of a God. So the idea that there is a God is widely held by a lot of people, but by a lot of other people, there's this thing called pantheism. Now, pantheism is the belief that God is everything and is in everything. Pantheism, pan just meaning all, right, is that theism is wrapped into everything that there is. This is where you get things like New Age spiritualism. New Aginess is kind of things like manifesting, or I guess like aura is another thing. You could talk, not the aura like the meme, the aura like, your energy. Or you could do tarot cards or palm readings. And all of this kind of goes into this area that we would call witchcraft. Now, the reason we would do this is simply because a lot of these New Age spiritualist movements stem from Eastern religions. So Eastern religions have a large influence on the things that people believe today. So when you talk to someone and they say, I don't believe in God, I'm pretty spiritual though. I find that really hard to have a belief with, honestly. And that's because I feel like it's like you got sunburned, but you claim that the sun isn't real. It's like, I believe in a spiritual realm. I believe that everything is connected to the spiritual realm. I believe that if I manifest my positive vibes out into the world, it'll just become true. But how? And what spiritual realm are you referring to? And also, where did that spiritual realm come from? Was it created, and who's in charge of it? These are the questions that don't sit well with me when I think of pantheism or New Age spiritualism. And it is a very slippery slope to go in from positive vibes and then slip your way down into the occult or things that are very dangerous and demonic. There is real other spiritual powers in the world, but they don't come from nowhere. My belief is that they come from hell. And when you expose yourself to these things, it's extremely dangerous. And this is extremely popular in our world today. So if you take anything away from these questions of the kinda category, I would say New Age spiritualism is a dangerous place to be. And it also doesn't really answer the truth claim that you experience in the world. So we're going to go into a different category of the is there a God? And I would answer yes. Again, that is because of our conversation last week. Now, to talk about a whole other category of religions, I think a really good question to ask is this: is truth subjective or objective? Now, when we talk about truth, there is not your truth or my truth. Well, maybe you think there is, and if you think that's true, you would be a subjective truth believer. The reason we call it subjective is think about the different subjects that you study in school. There is math, science, history, etc. Because of this, it is segregated by subject. And in the same way, if you believe truth is subjective, you believe truth is segregated by people. And you believe that there is your truth and someone else's truth and someone else's truth. Austin brought up a really, really good argument for the existence of God last week called the morality argument. If I came up and I just kicked your kneecaps in, that would be mean. And you don't have to believe anything specifically to know that that's mean and wrong. We should just not do it, right? Okay, so that's how we know that truth is objective, or things that are true no matter what. Like the idea that 1 + 1 = 2. Triangles have 3 sides. Coffee is the best drink known to mankind. These are things that are just known between everybody as factually true. I didn't know that you guys hated subjective truth so much. But here is examples of subjective truth is like, I think the Los Angeles Dodgers are the best baseball team. Bro, I'm from LA, don't hate. I think that Starbucks doesn't make great coffee. Okay, subjective. All right, but remember, we're not talking about what color is your favorite. We're talking about religion. And there's a religious claim that everybody can be correct. And it's under the subjective branch area. There's 2 things that you can focus on when you believe in a subjective truth in religion. And the first one that I want to point your attention to is universalism. Universalism is this idea that why can't all religions be true? Why can't they all be good? Why can't they all point you to God in different ways? Well, this is false just because if you look at the different claims that each religion makes, they all disagree with each other. Islam believes that Allah is the only God. Buddhism says that there's no God. Christianity says that God is a trinity. And Hindus believe that there are many gods. Can all of these things be true at the same time? No. So if you talk to someone, or if you yourself believe that universalism, or the belief that all religions are just different ways of experiencing or getting to God, it is an easy thing to refute, an easy thing to understand how that can't be true. Rainn Wilson from The Office is a believer in the faith tradition called Baha'i. Baha'i is this belief that if you take Islam, Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, and mash them all together in a blender, that they're all just little software updates to the same religion that was brought to us by Abraham. And that obviously cannot be true, because if the 2 people in charge disagree with each other, then it's just all moot. It can't be done, right? It can't be a thing. And that is a really good segue to my next topic of polytheism. Now, this is different from pantheism. Are you guys still with me, by the way? I feel like we're blazing through this. I'm trying to keep you here. Okay, great. Okay, so we talked about pantheism before, right? Pantheism is the belief that everything is God. Polytheism is different. Polytheism is the belief that there are lots and lots of gods, but not everything is God. There's a ton of them, but it's not everything. Here's the idea. Hindus believe in like a couple thousand different gods. Like there's a god for the sun, there's probably a god for coffee, there's a god of gods, there's the god of that god, and then there's the god who's in charge of fertility and a god in charge of fire. There's tons of gods, right? So you can pray to different gods for different things that you need. Indigenous people, good examples would be Native American traditions or Hawaiian. If you go to Hawaii and go to like a luau, they'll tell you lots of stories about the different gods that brought Hawaii into existence. These are beliefs that are similar to things like Greek mythology and Mayan mythology. Has anybody read Percy Jackson? Okay, Percy Jackson's a great book series. It's really good. Besides its polytheistic takes on things, I would say it's great fiction. And what I would say is that the gods in Percy Jackson and the gods in Greek mythology were truly always at odds with each other. They hated each other. They always disagreed about everything. And there is no way to run a good organization with multiple heads of anything. Because if everybody's disagreeing, well, somebody's got to be in charge, right? And that's why this is under the branch of subjective morality. It's because the gods have their own ideas of right and wrong, and the gods disagree with each other. And if that's true, then who do you listen to? That can't be true, because where would morality come from? Where would morality get its basis? It's a confusing thing to try to understand, but one of the best explanations that I heard was from Austin, and it's that someone needs to be in charge of all of the other things. Somebody needs to be in charge. We need to have an objective morality for a reason, and it's because there's an objective moral judge. So, let's look again. Is subjective morality the best truth claim that we can find in the world? I wouldn't say so. And again, we're seeking to find truth, and we want to follow truth wherever it leads us. And because I think an objective morality is more true, I want to talk about monotheism. Now, monotheism, again, theism meaning God and mono meaning one, that is the belief that there is only one God. Now, if there's only one God, there's only one guy in charge, and that guy in charge gets to call all of the shots. And that's why this falls under objective morality, because he's in charge of telling you right from wrong and good from bad. So that's why if I bust in your kneecaps, it's because there's one monotheistic God who's like, hey, that's not cool. Don't do that, okay? So here's the deal. There's a couple really big monotheistic religions that we're going to talk about. But what I want to warn you against first is where this red X is pointing you, and that's in the idea of religious cults. Now, you might see some of these things and be like, whoa, I've never heard them categorized as cults. Cults actually have a very specific agenda and category system to where you can factually put certain ideas or movements into a cult. And it's by definition that it's a cult. It's not by your opinion of whether or not it is a cult. So these religious cults are Mormonism, Jehovah's Witness, Christian Science, and the list goes on and on and on. But these are some of the biggest ones that you might have heard of. And the reason why they are cults is because, hey guys, with the whispering over there, I can hear it all the way from the stage. Thanks. The reason why that they are religious cults is because they offer no freedom of thinking for yourself. Somebody else does all of the thinking for you. Mormonism is wrought with this issue of other people, other humans being in charge. Jehovah's Witness is the same thing. Christian Science is the same thing. We have people in charge of your entire livelihood, what you eat, what you wear, what you drink, what you do, what you say, how many kids you have, who you're married to. It is all under the authority of human beings. Now, Mormonism, Jehovah's Witness, and Christian Science would all say that they are Christian religions. Do you guys feel like you are under the same burden of having to answer to Ethan anytime you want to make a decision? I sure hope not. Or Keith, right? This is not what our church does. I feel like sometimes when I was in high school and I was thinking about what I believe, I'm like, I used to believe in a God that died and then rose from the dead and then did miracles, and like, that's weird. That sounds kind of culty. That sounds like something that a weird culty person would say. The issue is that once I stepped away from Christianity and came back to it, I realized that cults are led by human beings, not God himself. And that's the main differentiator. And this is why I don't want you to follow a cult. It's pretty obvious and self-explanatory just in the name. But I want you to have a good life. Even if it is monotheistic and even if it is true up until this length of the tree, I want you to have a good life. I want you to know what is true, but I also want you to live in community with God and not have to answer to a human being in order to get to God. And that's where these all fall short. These are dangerous. I'm sure you guys have heard stories about them. A lot of them will say that they are Christian, but they have crazy doctrines that claim otherwise. My wife and I were on the sidewalk in Seattle, and we got to talk to a couple people who were Jehovah's Witness. They came up to me and were trying to hand me a flyer, and I was like, oh, this is great. This is great prep for my sermon. This is like last Friday. So I talked to them for like 30 minutes, and they believe crazy things. They believe that they are not sinful. They believe that Jesus did not rise from the dead. They believe that there's so many different things. Mormonism has this guy named Joseph Smith that said that he received a prophecy in like the 1600s, and it was like a new revelation from God himself, and he got it on this golden tablet, and there are no like available records of the ways that had happened. It's just like these things happened in a silo. People make up their own stories to start their own religions to be in charge. And that's where things like Christian Science come from too. So religious cults, I would say, although they are religious, they are monotheistic. They are obviously not based on truth. So what do we learn instead? Well, I want to point our attention to these things called Abrahamic religions. Does anybody remember Abraham from the Bible? Okay, all three of these religions on screen, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, are based on this one guy in the Old Testament, Abraham. They all have that common story in their holy scriptures, that Abraham was chosen by God, and he had a son, Isaac, and so on and so forth. But they differ in a lot of really big ways. So before I get into the differences between Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, which are three of the biggest religions in the world, I want to look back. We looked at the question, is there a God? And yes, there is. So then we get to the idea of, is truth subjective or objective? It's, of course, objective. And then we arrive at monotheism, and we're going to try not to get into a cult. And what we realize is we've knocked out a lot of the world's religions just based on this system of saying yes or no to certain questions. So what I want to do now is look at one of three of the biggest world religions, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. Now, as you might have gotten a sneak peek of earlier, Islam is a faith tradition and religion that is very protected by its people. It is very, very offensive to talk poorly about their prophet Muhammad. So I don't claim to... I do think Islam is a false religion, but as I know that there's a lot of people with a lot of different faith backgrounds in the room, and maybe your family is Islamic or Muslim, I just want to point things out to you in a loving way to teach you again what truth is, because it's not loving for me to tell you that you should just go follow something that is not true. Okay, so let's focus on Islam. This is a verse from the Quran, and the Quran believes that its text is very, very important. So much so that if you were to remove the original Arabic language that it was written in, then it would be completely falsified. It has to be in the original Arabic. So I've done the favor of leaving the original Arabic on screen just for their argument's sake. And it says this, it is certainly we who have revealed the reminder, and it is certainly we who will preserve it. If you look at the textual context of this verse in the Quran, what this means is that Allah, or the God of Islam, is the one who will preserve the Islamic texts, the Quran itself. People who are Muslim believe that Allah has a vested interest in the protection of their valuable texts. That's why they only show it in English when it's next to Arabic. It's very important to them that their text is credible, okay? So saying something like your text is not credible is to a Christian almost saying something like Jesus' bones were found and he did not rise from the dead. It's a pretty big deal to say that the Islamic texts are not credible. But I want to point out something that not a lot of Muslims read. I learned this from Nabil Qureshi in his book, Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus. And there is these writings called hadiths. Hadiths are writings about the Prophet Muhammad. And I've highlighted a version or a verse from these hadith. And what it basically says at the bottom is that there was this guy named Uthman. Uthman was in charge of a lot of different things in the Muslim faith. and they have different people that are in charge at different times. This guy saw that there was a bunch of confusion propping up amongst other people who were following Allah. And he was like, why is that happening? He learned that it's because their transcripts of the Quran were wrong. Now, remember how big of a deal that is for their transcripts to be wrong. And look at what is underlined. It says, all the other Quranic materials, whether written in fragmentary manuscripts or whole copies, were burnt. Now, does this sound like a text that is protected by the God of the Old Testament? No, some of it was burnt and set on fire because it was written poorly. And you might think like, well, what would stop me from just coming in and writing things on the Quran? The idea is that in the ancient times of, I think this happened in like the year 700, something like that, the issue at hand was that other people were reading these texts and other people were gaining confusion about what the teachings of the Muslim faith were. So it is living proof that not only is it not protected by Allah, but it is also known by these hadith writings that Uthman got all of the other copies and burned them. So this is like factual evidence within their own religious text that proves their own faith wrong. And it's crazy because a lot of people don't read these because at the bottom, you'll notice right now we're on chapter 4,987. And that's a lot of chapters. It's really hard to read all of those things. So a lot of people just don't do it. And this is why the Bible is so awesome. It's because you can go study the evidence in the text yourself. It is understandable for you. You don't have to just trust me and my word for it. You can go test the claims on your own. And if you were to do that in the Muslim faith, you would find that their text is not credible. Another example or more concerns that I have with the Islamic faith tradition is as follows. Muhammad was spoken to by a spirit in a cave. This is how the Islamic faith began. And Muhammad was deeply frightened by the spirit. He ran away, ran home, asked his wife to take care of him and protect him. And his wife was the one who convinced him that this spirit was the prophet Gabriel and that it was God speaking to him and giving him revelations about a new religion that he should prop up. A spirit does not do this unless it is from an evil place. So what I believe is that a demon came to Muhammad and told him to start a new religion. And that is what the basis of the Islamic faith is. This is a really big deal, and it's something that is widely celebrated among the Islamic people because they believe it really was the prophet Gabriel. But when you read into it and you realize that Muhammad was deeply terrified of what he was hearing and the experience that he had in that cave, I don't think it sounds like an angel. He did not come like the angels of the Bible and say, do not be afraid. He came down and terrified the heck out of him, so much so that he ran home to his wife, and his wife is the one who convinced him. Now, you might see my little footnote there that says it is his first and favorite wife. So you might ask yourself, how many wives did he have? Well, he had 12 wives. The reason that this is a big deal is because Muhammad is propped up to be a really, really good guy, and he's a perfect example for all people. But the Islamic laws state that you could only have up to 4 wives. So either there's a special circumstance where the prophet can have as many wives as he wants, or this is 12 to symbolize the nations of Israel, or that this is just messed up and he broke the law. Also, his youngest wife was 9 years old and he consummated that marriage. And that's gross. And that is not someone that I would recommend you follow in the footsteps of, because this is what the Islamic faith believes. It's that we can follow Allah and the Prophet Muhammad with footstep by footstep faithfulness. But he did things like this. He also did things like lead religious wars in the Arabian Peninsula. In the Quran, it talks about how he rid Christianity out of that area. He specifically said, I will take the Christians and the Jews and eradicate them until they are no more, and Muslims are the only ones left. That is not someone I would recommend you follow in the footsteps on. Again, they also believe in the Islamic faith that prophets cannot die and that Jesus was not crucified. Now, this is a big deal, but I'm going to get to that later because I think this is a silly thing to believe that prophets cannot die. And I'll explain that in a little bit. But one more really big thing that I want to point out, I actually discovered this just today when talking to Austin. This is a evidence that the Quran was partly plagiarized, and it was not a complete revelation from Allah himself. Now, I want you to read this. Our Lord is Allah, who is in the heaven. Holy is thy name. Thy command reigns supreme. Does this sound familiar to anybody? It kind of sounds like the Lord's Prayer from Matthew, which was written like 600 years beforehand. If you plagiarized in school, it would be cheating because it's not your work. This is not God's work. This is Allah copying God's work through the book of Matthew in order to claim it as his own and put the name Allah on it. This text is not credible, and there is good reason to not be in the Muslim faith. But one of the biggest reasons is actually the commonalities that all of the Abrahamic religions have. They all have an opinion about Jesus. And actually, almost every religion has an opinion about Jesus. Jesus is not the center of all religions, but Jesus is in almost all religions. Jesus in Islam is a prophet, and he was a great guy, and they don't think that he died on the cross. Judaism thinks he was a really nice guy, thinks that he was maybe a good teacher, but they don't think that he was the Messiah, the anointed one, the Christ who came to save us all. Christianity is the only one that props Jesus up as the one that he claims to be, and he claimed to be God in the flesh. Now, this is a really big deal, but to understand why, I want to turn your attention to the Joe Rogan podcast, where just this past week, a Canadian apologist was discussing with Joe Rogan about this exact very thing. So take a look at this.
Yeah, I mean, we know a lot about Roman crucifixion, and we
Pretty
know
brutal.
that, and we know that they did their job well.
Yeah.
And so, in fact, if you look at, say, very skeptical biblical scholars, like non-believing, atheist, agnostic Christian scholars, they will say if we can know anything about Jesus, like they'll cast a doubt on a lot of the things that we read about in the Gospels in terms of the actual historical Jesus of Nazareth. They'll say one thing we can be sure of is that he died by crucifixion under Pontius Pilate.
So one thing that we can be certain about is that Jesus died from crucifixion under Pontius Pilate. No matter who you talk to, it is one of the hardest facts to dispute. There's a lot of people that disagree about the idea that he rose again and is resurrected, but it is really, really difficult to talk about Jesus and pretend that he did not die on a cross and was buried. That is extremely difficult. There is almost no credible scholar that will say that that didn't happen. Islamic faith will say that that didn't happen. Judaism will say that Jesus was the one who was not God in the flesh and he was not the Messiah. They're still waiting for the Messiah to come. They take some of the Old Testament texts and they say that Jesus did not fulfill them in the ways that we would hope that he did. But in reality, that's false. Jesus fulfills all of the Old Testament texts. All of the prophecies that were made about him, they're true. Jesus is the central truth claim of so many religions. And I would just want to remind you of where we came from. I asked you to follow the truth wherever it leads you. There is a lot of people out there who are claiming to have truth. There is a lot of people out there who say that they know the way, that Jesus is not the way. But this is what Jesus says about himself. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. So when I say follow truth wherever it leads you, I really mean follow the truth wherever it leads you. Because Jesus is not only true, but he is the truth. Jesus is truth incarnate. Jesus is God incarnate. Jesus is love. Jesus loves you. Jesus is real and he is truthful. And I mean this with all of my heart. Because a lot of people, again, will try to tell you what truth is. But if you study the Christian texts, if you study ancient history, if you read the original manuscripts, if you learn these different things, there is significant evidence around the truth claims of Jesus. This is not something that you have to have blind faith in, but this is something that you can plant your faith in firmly and have a firm foundation for your faith. Because the truth claims of Jesus are real. I'm going to leave you guys on a really big cliffhanger because next week we're going to talk about all of the truth claims around the resurrection of Jesus. Because I don't have enough time to get into everything, but next week we're going to talk about why Jesus actually rose from the dead. And that is one of the most important things that you could possibly talk about in the Christian faith. Because like I said earlier, if you could produce the bones of Jesus and prove that they were Jesus's, then he would not have actually rose from the dead and ascended into heaven, meaning that he would not have been God, meaning that your faith is in vain and you are still in your sins. It's a big deal that Jesus rose from the grave. It's a big deal that Jesus claims to be the truth. Jesus in that verse is claiming to be God himself. So what I want to ask you to do is this week, as you seek to follow truth, because truth is really all that is worth putting your life on, do it with confidence. Do it with confidence, knowing that you have a reason for your faith, that there are many reasons why these other lies in the world and these other religions are not worth putting your faith in, because they are not truth. Jesus is the way, Jesus is the truth, and Jesus is the life. Jesus claims to be God. He rose from the grave, and you're going to find out a lot more about that next week. But I want to leave you guys enough time to talk with your small groups, with our discussion about Rain Ministries. If you are impacted by this, and if you're saying like, man, I really like, I don't know what I believe anymore. Like my faith is maybe shaken, or maybe I had a different faith background and I want to come to the true religion of Jesus. Then I would invite you to pray. Ask Jesus to come into your heart. Ask the truth to come into your heart and follow the truth wherever it leads you. But I would also ask you that maybe you've been following Jesus for a long time, or maybe today's your first day making that decision. I would ask you to do something about it. I would ask you, what can you do to follow the truth? Rain Ministries is a beautiful opportunity where you can go to people who don't believe in Jesus, people of other faith backgrounds, people who need to know the truth, and you can share it with them. You could be the one who delivers the truth into their life. And this is just a beautiful, we planned so much of this so long ago that Rain Ministries would come and that we would do this apologetic series. It is just, I think, so beautiful that they're here today. And I am just so excited for that opportunity for you guys to go talk to them at that booth and answer that call to follow the truth. I'm going to say a quick prayer. And again, I would invite you to pray if you haven't before. Pray to God to invite him into your heart. And after that, we'll go to small groups. Lord, I thank you so much for who you are, that you're true, that you're awesome, that you're real. I thank you for the knowledge that we can have in other faith traditions. Knowledge that we don't have to just place our faith blindly, but we can study these things. We can know them. We can read other texts. We can see how they're false, and we can know that the gospel and your faith is true. So God, I just ask that you touch our hearts today, that if someone is seeking to put Jesus at the center of their life today, that they would just do so now, that they would submit their whole life to you and follow the truth wherever it leads them. God, we love you and thank you. In your name, amen.